She knew perfectly well that the master of the house was peeking from outside the door, yet she still tried on the mistress's dress. She deliberately showed off her curvy figure. After this whole little performance, it worked exactly as she hoped, leaving the master completely tempted. Satisfied, she gently closed the half-open door. After being caught by his wife, Pavel showed not the slightest panic. He even put on an act, saying those two sisters were like his own children, and besides, being jealous of two lowly serfs did not suit her status as a noble lady. To reassure his wife, Pavel told her that the village headman had come a few days earlier to propose marriage. The headman had long taken a fancy to the elder sister, Vasilisa. He wanted to marry this capable and beautiful woman and bring her home. Although Vasilisa had not agreed yet, she was only a serf, and had no right to decide her own marriage. Everything could only be decided by the master.
Василиса скромна, и место свое знает. Наташка.
Pavel's wife had not been worrying for nothing. The elder sister Vasilisa had always behaved properly and understood her place, but the younger sister Dasha was not willing to spend her whole life as a servant. Countless times, she imagined herself wearing those beautiful dresses and taking the mistress's place, and every time this happened, Vasilisa would laugh at her sister for dreaming too big. One day, the two sisters accompanied the master and mistress to church for worship. During the service, Vasilisa kept exchanging glances with the young nobleman Ivan. What she did not know was that all of this had fallen into the eyes of Ivan's mother. In an age ruled by class, a servant lowly enough to be trampled into the dust was never destined to marry a noble standing high above her, but the difference in status still could not stop two lovers from running toward each other. After night fell, Vasilisa put on her coat, wrapped a scarf around her head, picked up the whistle hidden under the table, and quietly slipped out. When she reached the frozen riverbank, she soon heard a clear whistle sound. She blew the whistle in her hand in response, and Ivan, hiding on the bridge, immediately jumped down behind her. Vasilisa excitedly embraced her lover tightly, but a moment later, Ivan noticed the sadness on her face.
Так ты ж барин, а я девка дворовая. Что ж между нами быть-то может?
Не говори так, не смей. Я тебе вольно у Елагина выкуплю. Обвенчаемся. В крайнем случае сбежим.
Ivan promised that no matter what happened, he would never leave her. His sincerity gave the worried Vasilisa a glimpse of hope, but to her surprise, that brief happiness was soon destroyed. Winter passed and spring arrived, and in the blink of an eye, the season of renewal had come. That day, the village headman drove a carriage and brought 2 bundles of chopped firewood. He crossed the lush green fields all the way to Mr. Pavel's house. When he saw Vasilisa at the courtyard gate, he walked straight toward her. He took a newly bought scarf from his bag and personally draped it over her shoulders. Vasilisa thanked him for the gift, but she understood very well that gifts without reason usually came with a price. She asked the headman whether he needed something from her. Instead, she heard words that shocked her almost speechless. He said, "I came here to ask you to marry me." Her sister advised her that she might as well accept. Otherwise, in the end, she would only become an old maid nobody wanted. Vasilisa did not tell her sister about Ivan's promise. That night, she once again waited until everyone was asleep, then rushed to the small wooden bridge for their meeting. This night, Ivan seemed especially passionate. He took her to a small wooden hut that had been temporarily built nearby. Vasilisa tried hard to stop him from going any further. Shyly, she said that now was not the time. After calming down, Ivan struggled to tell her that guests were coming to his home tomorrow. They were the family of the fiancé his mother had chosen for him. Hearing this, Vasilisa instantly felt the world spin. She had never imagined that she had fallen in love with a man who was playing with her feelings. Although Ivan repeatedly promised that he had no feelings for the other woman at all, Vasilisa's heart still turned as cold as a river frozen solid in winter. Meanwhile, Master Pavel's wife suddenly developed a high fever and could not stop coughing. The symptoms over the past few days, along with the bloodstains on her handkerchief, showed that she had already fallen ill with an incurable disease. When Dasha went to get the medicine, she hesitated for a long time. In the end, she quietly increased the dose in the water, but because she was guilty and nervous, she accidentally knocked over the cup and was harshly scolded by Pavel. By dawn, his wife's temperature gradually returned to normal. Pavel also walked out of the room looking exhausted, but to his surprise, the moment he came out, he saw Dasha in her nightgown, seductively leading him step by step to the storage room in the corner of the yard. Pavel's wife heard the noise and secretly followed them, and she saw a scene inside that was too shameful to look at. At that moment, she instantly lost the will to live. In despair, she ended what little life she had left. but outsiders believed she had simply died because her illness could no longer be cured. Sadly, she had never given birth to even one child. After the funeral, Ivan's mother sat in the carriage and did not leave. When Dasha passed by, she deliberately dropped a string of pearls on the ground.
Обронили, сударыня.
Василиса, сестра твоя?
Да, сударыня.
Надо же, сударыня, образованная.
Чуток.
Укажи сестре, где ее место. Иди-ка ближе, научу как.
Ivan's mother had long noticed the flirtation between her son and Vasilisa. Aside from the difference in their status, the most important problem was that the family had already been living beyond its means. She had to find her son a wealthy wife. After returning home, she stopped her son just as he was about to go out. She told Ivan that arranging this marriage was not only for his own sake, but also for the future of his younger siblings. Ivan made it clear that he would not honor a marriage his mother had decided on without him, but his mother mocked him as a simple-minded fool. At the same time, in the woods, Vasilisa was anxiously blowing her whistle, but Ivan still had not appeared. After returning, she was still deeply worried. Unexpectedly, her sister brought her good news, saying the master wanted them to go to Ivan's house to help clean. Vasilisa only thought about being able to see Ivan. She had no idea this was actually Ivan's mother's plan. That afternoon, the sisters arrived on time. They did not dare wander around, and began working the moment they entered the house. Just as the two were kneeling on the floor, scrubbing hard, Ivan's mother suddenly appeared silently at the doorway. She signaled Dasha with her eyes to go to the window, and Dasha understood immediately. After all, this was the plan the two of them had agreed on long ago. The goal was to make Vasilisa know when to back off. At that moment, Ivan's fiancée was sitting on the swing in the yard. She was enthusiastically recommending her favorite poet, Pushkin, to Ivan. She eagerly wanted to recite a few poems by her idol, but Ivan interrupted her. Ivan said he only saw her as a younger sister, and could not marry her. He knelt on the ground and sincerely asked for her forgiveness, but to his surprise, his fiancée had already fallen in love with someone else too. Ivan excitedly lifted his fiancée into his arms. He thought that since both of them were willing to cancel the engagement, the obstacle between him and Vasilisa had finally been cleared, but he never expected that this would create a massive misunderstanding. That scene instantly tore her heart to pieces.
Голову он тебе дурил. Помолвку скоро объявят.
Dasha mercilessly shattered Vasilisa's fantasy. A serf girl could never marry a young master whose status was worlds apart from hers. All that talk of love and affection was only a momentary craving for something new. The facts in front of her, combined with her sister's words, completely broke Vasilisa. She ran out of Ivan's house without caring about anything, but she did not go home. Instead, she went straight to the village headman. She told him that he did not need the master's order, because she would willingly marry him. At this moment, Ivan had no idea that Vasilisa had been to his home. He also did not know that she had seen him embracing his fiancée. He took the whistle to their secret meeting place, but even after blowing it for a long time, he received no response. On his way back, he happened to run into the village headman. The headman had long heard the rumors about Ivan and Vasilisa, but because Ivan was a young nobleman, the headman did not dare question him. He could only drive past quickly, venting his dissatisfaction in silence. Ivan saw a kind of hostility in the headman's eyes. A bad feeling instantly rose in his heart. After the carriage gradually moved away, he suddenly turned around and chased after it. However, he was still one step too late. Mr. Pavel had already officially promised Vasilisa to the village headman. Ivan rushed up to the headman and slapped him from both sides. Then he pulled out a whip and lashed the headman hard. Although the headman, as a serf, did not dare fight back, he still snatched the whip and threw it to the ground. Then, as if making a show of defiance, he took Vasilisa by the hand and left. Heartbroken, Ivan stumbled back home. He coldly told his mother that he would return to the army tomorrow. The next day, before the morning sun had fully risen, the village was already bustling with excitement. This was the big day when the village headman would marry Vasilisa. The two wore traditional folk clothing and slowly walked out of the church under the villagers' blessing as they scattered grains over them. Sitting in the carriage, Vasilisa stared blankly, with none of the joy a bride should have. The evening light pierced through the thin mist and fell across the bride's breathtaking face. It coated her in warm golden light, while also revealing the sorrow in her heart that would not fade. Almost at the same time, Ivan set out on another road and left his hometown. He threw himself completely into serving his country. After marriage, Vasilisa lived like the other peasant women in the village, with endless farm work and housework every day. But for her, this was not torment. because only by staying busy from morning to night would she have no time to think about Ivan. After learning that Ivan had a fiancée, Dasha believed he had only been playing with her sister's feelings. Otherwise, he should have helped buy her sister's freedom from the very beginning, to stop Vasilisa from being abandoned in the end and becoming a laughingstock. Dasha had agreed to carry out that plan with Ivan's mother. Although Ivan's mother successfully separated her son from Vasilisa, she did not get the result she wanted, because Ivan's fiancée cancelled the engagement on her own. Now, the family's finances had not improved, and her son had stayed in the army for a long time without returning home. For a while, she wondered whether she had made a mistake. One day, the village headman brought Vasilisa and 2 other women to Master Pavel's house. It was because Pavel was hosting important guests that day and did not have enough help. Pavel's guests were all local gentry and nobles. They openly praised Napoleon, the man invading their own country, as a great figure. This was nothing but the face of people selling out their homeland for personal gain. One of the gentry said that Russian peasants lacked manners and education. After hearing this, Pavel directly called Vasilisa over. He proudly boasted that his serf could not only read, but even speak fluent French, but the guests laughed in disbelief. Clearly, they did not believe a servant could have such ability. Vasilisa had not expected that what they wanted her to translate would be an extremely vulgar insult against women, with no expression on her face. She said she did not understand French. This embarrassed Master Pavel in front of everyone. After this small incident, Vasilisa continued rushing around, serving these lofty guests. But when she turned her head, she unexpectedly saw Ivan dressed in military uniform. He had just returned from the army that day. He had been invited to attend the banquet with his younger siblings. After seeing him, Vasilisa was so emotional she did not know what to do, but she also knew that there was no longer any possibility between them. She could only hold back the urge to embrace him and run to one side. Seeing Ivan follow her, Vasilisa continued to flee rationally, but in the end, she was still cornered inside the barn. With nowhere to run, Vasilisa could only let him hold her. She deliberately avoided looking into those eyes filled with deep affection, but Ivan said that he thought of her every day. He was also responsible for the fact that they had ended up like this. If he had been braver from the beginning, this would not be their ending now. Although Vasilisa's emotional defenses were gradually crumbling, in the end, she still restrained the impulse of her feelings and calmly told Ivan that she was already married. However, everything the two did inside the barn fell into the eyes of the village headman. His status meant he could not rush in and attack Ivan. He could only swing his axe hard into a wooden post to vent his frustration. Not long after, Napoleon led a massive army and began invading Russia. The priest gathered all the villagers together and announced the emergency. Vasilisa stepped forward and asked Master Pavel to organize a group to resist, because the French army could reach this place at any time. However, her husband scolded her and told her to remember her place. Meanwhile, on the front line, Ivan's unit was locked in fierce battle with Napoleon's army. The commander ordered Ivan to lead a team of elite cavalry as the vanguard. They swore to defend every inch of their homeland with their lives, but the enemy firepower was fierce, and their momentum was overwhelming. Although both sides suffered heavy casualties, in the end, Ivan's unit was almost completely wiped out. At dawn, Vasilisa suddenly woke from a nightmare. She had dreamed of Ivan covered in wounds, lying in a pool of blood. She made an excuse to go drink water, but in truth, she secretly ran to the cross by the river to pray. She prayed that the man she loved would return safely. Soon, the clear sky suddenly poured down with heavy rain. It seemed to foretell that something good was about to happen. Just as Vasilisa excitedly spread her arms, she turned her head and unexpectedly discovered a French cavalryman. Seeing her fear, the man did not approach, but rode away directly, but on his face was an emotion Vasilisa could not see. A few days later, a large French force followed the small road and arrived at Vasilisa's village. From the moment they entered, they began robbing the villagers of grain and livestock. They also beat defenseless civilians at will. What Vasilisa did not expect was that the commander leading them was the very man she had met by the river, and he clearly treated Vasilisa with special attention. After the French entered the village, all the young girls went into hiding. However, one farmer's daughter was still accidentally discovered. Just as a soldier tried to assault her, the girl's mother stabbed him from behind and killed him. The family hurried to the village headman's house, knelt down, and hoped to seek protection. Vasilisa immediately closed the courtyard gate, but even the village headman was only a serf with no real voice. To receive real protection, they still had to go to their master, Pavel. However, Pavel did not intend to protect the farmer's family, wanting only to save himself. But when the French commander came to ask him for the people, He said he did not know where the family had gone, although they still did not know how long they could protect the farmer's family. At least Pavel had not handed them over. This finally gave Vasilisa a little comfort for the moment, but not long after she returned home, her sister unexpectedly brought her terrible news. Ivan had been killed on the battlefield and would never come back. Although Vasilisa was in pain beyond words, she still pushed down her grief and, together with her husband the headman, hid the farmer who had killed the French soldier. French commander Blier had previously seen Vasilisa and her husband come to Pavel, so he guessed that they must be hiding the criminal family. He ordered his men to bring Vasilisa to him alone. Aside from interrogating her, there was another reason. He wanted to be alone with her, because from the first moment he saw Vasilisa, he had been deeply attracted to her. When Blier called the farmer's family murderers, Vasilisa said with righteous anger that they were not criminals. If his soldier had not tried to assault an innocent girl, none of this would have happened. Under his questioning, Vasilisa insisted that she had never seen the farmer's family. Blier said that although the two countries were now at war, justice still existed in war. As long as the criminal was brought in, they would receive a fair trial. Otherwise, if other soldiers did something like setting houses on fire, even he would not be able to stop them. Vasilisa pulled back the hand he had kissed. She wished she could devour this enemy who had invaded her country. After night fell, she secretly went to see the farmer hiding in the little wooden hut by the river. She repeated what Blier had said during the day, to avoid bringing disaster on the other villagers. The farmer decided to step forward alone and take responsibility for everything, but to their surprise, the moment he walked out of the hut, they discovered that the outside had already been completely surrounded by French soldiers. How could Vasilisa have expected Blier to break his word? He had promised a fair trial, but instead had the farmer's entire family tied up like criminals. Vasilisa wanted to go with them to find Blier, but her husband did not want her to risk her life, so he took her place and sat on the carriage. The headman told her not to worry. He said he would make sure they received a fair and just outcome, but for serfs like them, whose homeland had been invaded, the word justice simply could not exist. Soon, the carriage stopped in a field of wild grass. The headman was threatened at gunpoint by the soldiers and could only leave alone. The farmer's family was forced off the carriage and told to run in the opposite direction. The headman did not dare look back, and could only keep walking straight ahead. But the gunshots and screams behind him nearly broke him. The pleas of women and children stabbed into him like knives, yet he could only let tears of despair slide down his face. At this moment, Vasilisa was anxiously waiting at home. When her husband pushed open the courtyard gate with heavy steps, she had already guessed the result. Vasilisa could no longer suppress the hatred burning inside her. She grabbed a sickle and rushed angrily toward the French soldiers stealing grain. She slashed open the sacks on the cart with all her strength. She would rather let the grain spill onto the ground than leave it to the enemy. But because of this, she was arrested by the soldiers and brought before Commander Blier. Although her hands were bound and she had no ability to resist, Vasilisa still fearlessly met Blier's gaze. She said he had not kept his previous promise, but Blier unexpectedly said with contempt that he would not keep a promise to a serf. Besides, war was simply this cruel. Only blood could calm angry soldiers. When Vasilisa accused him of not even sparing women and children, those words completely enraged Blier. He drew his sword and cut the ropes binding her. Then he actually shoved Vasilisa down, trying to force himself on her. Vasilisa fought desperately, but it was no use. In the end, she could only spit in his face, showing the contempt she felt for him. Seeing the disgust on her face somehow made Blier feel an unexpected shame, but to save his own pride, he still ordered a harsh punishment. In front of everyone, Vasilisa was forced to lie across a wooden bench, letting the cane tear bloody marks across her body. She endured it without begging for mercy even once, but the torn flesh on her back still made the villagers present unable to look. Blier's purpose in doing this was to warn everyone. This was what happened to anyone who resisted the French army. Compared with Vasilisa's misery, her sister Dasha's life was going surprisingly well. Ever since Master Pavel's wife died, she had become half the mistress of that household. Now that she was pregnant, her position was even more secure than before. But even though this was Pavel's first child, he still had no intention of marrying Dasha. After all, she was only a lowly serf. Pavel thought Dasha would cherish the chance to stay by his side. How could he know that Dasha had long been having an affair with the household's hired hand? She often met him in secret whenever Pavel was away from home. Meanwhile, after learning of her son's death, Ivan's mother completely collapsed. When Vasilisa came over after recovering from her wounds, she saw the woman sitting blankly at the table. She said that not only had all the servants run away, Even the valuables had been stolen clean. Now there was not even a bowl of rice left in the house. The children could only catch fish in the river and pick snails in the fields to fill their stomachs. Seeing the once high and mighty lady fall into such a state, Vasilisa felt something she could not put into words. She said that if the lady did not mind, she would bring some bread over, but Ivan's mother seemed not to hear her. Kneeling on the floor and constantly wiping it, like a madwoman, Ivan's mother drove Vasilisa out of the house, but Vasilisa did not leave. She sat on the swing where Ivan had once sat and cried without restraint. Only when the sun went down did she slowly get up and prepare to go home, but she had not gone far when Ivan's younger brother hurriedly chased after her. He said their mother was in terrible condition. When Vasilisa ran inside, she found that the woman who had once been so domineering was now extremely weak. She lay lifelessly on the bed. She called Vasilisa to her bedside and asked her to forgive her earlier rudeness, but what she wanted Vasilisa to forgive even more was the shameful thing she had done before, tearing her and Ivan apart.
Иди тише, не бросай. Прости меня. Прости.
Ivan's mother left this world with deep reluctance. She also left behind several underage children. Vasilisa let go of the past and brought them back to her home. At least they would have food to eat and would not starve. Because of Ivan, the village headman did have resentment in his heart. However, he did not drive the children away. He had always known that his wife did not love him, but all he could do was give her all his love and tolerance. He hoped that one day, he might move Vasilisa's heart. One day, French soldiers stormed into the village shrine and carried away everything valuable. The villagers rushed over in anger to stop their act of desecration. One little boy ran inside, wanting to pick up the discarded holy icon. Seeing this, the village headman hurriedly pulled the boy back. But unexpectedly, at that moment, a soldier behind him pulled the trigger. Her husband's death completely ignited Vasilisa's will to fight. She knew that even if they did not resist, they would never have peaceful days again. She discussed it with other like-minded villagers, deciding to take food and weapons and hide in the forest. After returning home, while she was packing, Ivan's uncle, who had been away, suddenly appeared. He decided to take his nieces and nephews back and care for them himself. But Ivan's younger sister and second brother insisted on staying, ready to fight alongside Vasilisa. They only handed the youngest brother over to their uncle. That night, Vasilisa placed burning hot coals into a clay jar. Under cover of darkness, she secretly went to the French grain storage site. She threw the jar hard onto the haystack outside the wall. Soon, the hot coals ignited the dry straw. The entire grain warehouse was swallowed by flames. After doing all this, Vasilisa took Ivan's younger siblings, along with the little food and winter clothing they had, and walked deep into the forest. Although she still did not know what to do next, in Vasilisa's heart, there were only two words: revenge. She wanted revenge for Ivan, who had died on the battlefield, revenge for the innocent farmer's family, and revenge for the husband who had tolerated and loved her without limit. But at this moment, she could not possibly predict that Ivan, whom she thought would never return, had actually survived by sheer luck. Not long ago, she had only been an ordinary peasant woman. She prayed that the man she loved on the battlefield would return safely, but after her homeland was invaded, the man she loved died in battle, and her husband was brutally killed. She resolutely picked up a weapon and walked the path of resistance. Under Vasilisa's call, a guerrilla force made up mainly of women and teenagers rose in the forest. With few guns, they could only use sickles, axes, and pitchforks as weapons. Every day, they practiced fighting non-stop, waiting for the right moment to come. Soon, two teenagers returned to the village to gather information. They learned that two French supply wagons would pass through soon. Vasilisa had once seen how they transported grain and supplies. Every two large wagons were guarded by only 5 soldiers, and they had more than 40 people here. This was the perfect chance to seize food and weapons. 2 days later, the French supply wagons did indeed appear on the forest road. By then, Vasilisa and her comrades had been lying in ambush for a long time. With one hand signal from her, everyone rushed down from the hill. They bravely fought to the death against the enemies who had invaded their homeland. Although one member sadly died in this battle, for peasants taking up weapons for the first time, this was already a major victory. Not only did they capture horses, guns, and food, they even took several French soldiers alive. The next day, Vasilisa and her fighters escorted the captured soldiers to the nearest command post. Just after dismounting, she noticed a familiar-looking figure galloping past. For a moment, she thought her longing had made her hallucinate. She never would have imagined that the man who had just passed by was Ivan, who had escaped death. After reporting back to his unit, Ivan could not wait to return home, but the familiar smell of food and the laughter of the old days were gone from the house forever. His uncle said that after his mother died, she had entrusted the children to Vasilisa, but not long after, Vasilisa's husband was unfortunately killed. She then took a group of people and hid in the forest. Because he did not know Vasilisa's exact location, Ivan went to Dasha that very night to ask for information, but unexpectedly, the moment he arrived at Master Pavel's house, he was captured by French soldiers who had already been lying in ambush there. French commander Blair did not put Ivan to death immediately. Instead, he used him as bait to lure Vasilisa out. Soon, the news that Ivan was about to be hanged spread through the whole village. Vasilisa was overjoyed that Ivan had returned alive, but the worry that followed made her brow tighten. Blair sent word that as long as he saw Vasilisa, he would release Ivan. Even though she knew it was a trap, Vasilisa still decided to go. However, she did not take any of her fighters into danger. Alone, she walked out of the dense forest while praying. Just as Ivan was about to be taken away for execution, she finally returned. Ivan looked in disbelief at the figure walking out of the darkness. Only then did he suddenly realize that this was Blair's scheme. But after seeing Vasilisa appear, Blair not only refused to release Ivan, he had her captured as well. The two were taken to a blacksmith shop. The blacksmith locked shackles around their ankles and nailed them to stone blocks weighing thousands of pounds. Ivan used every bit of strength in his body to drag the stone block. Finally, he managed to touch his lover's fingers. After grinding his ankles bloody and raw, Ivan finally dragged the stone block to Vasilisa. They embraced tightly and poured out the feelings in their hearts. But at that moment, the door was suddenly opened. It was the blacksmith walking in with an axe. In just a few blows, he chopped through the iron chains on their ankles and told them to run quickly. It turned out the blacksmith's son had been killed by the French not long before. That was why he had secretly killed the guard and rescued the two of them. Vasilisa and Ivan did not dare stop, running all the way to the familiar little bridge. Ivan hoped she would leave with him, but Vasilisa firmly said she would not abandon the comrades fighting beside her in the forest, perhaps because she feared that after this farewell, they might never see each other again. Vasilisa finally decided to give herself completely to Ivan. Under the sky as their blanket and the earth as their bed, the two lovers completed an intimacy they had never shared before. At the same time, Dasha had also reached the day of giving birth. After hours of suffering, she finally gave birth safely to a baby boy. Hearing the baby's cries, Pavel was so excited he could hardly speak. He promised to give Dasha her freedom. She would no longer be a lowly serf. Over the next few months, Vasilisa continued attacking the French with her guerrilla fighters, and on the front line, Ivan's army was also driving Napoleon's forces into steady retreat. Because Pavel had always supported Napoleon's side, seeing the French army losing momentum, he hurriedly packed his valuables and prepared to flee to Paris ahead of time. During this time, he took Dasha to the church overnight, intending to formally marry her as his lawful wife. To rise from nothing and become a high-ranking lady had always been Dasha's dream, but she did not speak the wedding vows, and instead walked away in shame.
Не могу я, Паша. Не по-божески это.
Ну чего ты испугалась-то, глупенькая?
Левушка не твой сын.
Pavel had thought he had finally fathered a child in his old age. Only in the end did he learn that all those years without children had not been his wife's fault. It was because he himself was unable to have children. Meanwhile, Blair's army was repeatedly attacked by the guerrillas, so he deliberately spread information. He claimed that an important figure would pass through the forest the day after tomorrow, using it to lure Vasilisa and the guerrillas out. Sure enough, after receiving the information, Vasilisa set up an ambush early. She planned to cut down the wooden bridge they had to cross. However, before she could place the barrels of gunpowder, she saw that from the other side, the French army had already launched an attack. Caught completely off guard, Vasilisa was knocked down by a charging horse. Enduring the intense pain in her body, she pulled out a pistol and, with a trembling hand, pulled the trigger, successfully detonating the gunpowder barrel nearby. But in the end, the gap in numbers and weapons was simply too great. Eventually, all the fighters, including Vasilisa, were captured. After learning that her sister was being held alone in the barn, Dasha secretly came to find her when no one was paying attention. She cried as she told Vasilisa that her son had been born. The child was not Master Pavel's flesh and blood. He belonged to the hired hand in the house, but she herself did not love the child's father. Dasha hoped her sister would bow her head to the French and save her life, because aside from her son, her sister was the only family she had. Only by staying alive could they fulfill their dreams. Only then could they fulfill their wish of walking through the streets of Paris.
Дашка, ты мечтала.
When Dasha returned, she found Pavel ordering people to pack his belongings, and the hired hand actually questioned her about why she had told the truth. His plan had been incredibly calculating. As long as Dasha married Pavel, they could quietly get rid of him afterward. Then the entire household would belong to them. Seeing that Dasha had not acted according to the plan, the hired hand, blinded by greed, rushed into the room. He took out a knife, intending to kill Pavel. At the critical moment, Dasha grabbed a stone carving nearby and smashed it hard onto the hired hand's head. By now, Pavel no longer hated her. He even hoped that Dasha and the child would go to Paris with him, but because of guilt, and because she was worried about her sister, Dasha ultimately chose to stay. Before leaving, Pavel left the house to her. He also set aside a large sum of money for her and the child. Meanwhile, Vasilisa and the surviving guerrilla fighters were brought before the gallows. Fortunately, the teenagers in the group were granted a pardon. Finally, Blyer came to Vasilisa. He said that as long as she was willing to return to France with him, she could live, but Vasilisa said nothing. She only gave him a contemptuous smile. Just then, Ivan suddenly charged in with a team of elite cavalry. He rushed to Vasilisa's side without caring about anything and rescued her. The sight of the two embracing instantly ignited Blyer's rage. He picked up his saber and, with murderous intent on his face, thrust it toward Ivan, but to his surprise, after several rounds, he was killed by Ivan instead. Ivan drove his sword through Blyer's abdomen. Ivan thought he had stopped breathing completely, so he hurried over to untie Vasilisa. Just as the two held each other tightly, Vasilisa suddenly noticed Blyer in the distance raising a pistol with his last breath. The muzzle was aimed directly at Ivan. Without showing anything, she turned around and used her own body to shield the man she loved. But to her surprise, the gunshot she expected never came. Although war follows the law of the jungle, where the weak are beaten, love follows a different truth. The person who is truly loved is the real winner.